George Papadopoulos. Introduction and Findings. In early March 2016, following a short stint working for the Ben Carson campaign, George Papadopoulos asked Trump campaign advisor Sam Clovis about joining the Trump foreign policy team. On March 21, 2016, Trump publicly announced his foreign policy team, which included Papadopoulos and 4 others. Throughout the campaign and following the election, Papadopoulos proffered himself as a conduit between the Trump team and foreign governments, including Russia, Egypt, and Greece. During his initial conversations with Clovis in early March, Papadopoulos learned that, quote, a principal foreign policy focus of the campaign was an improved U.S. relationship with Russia, close quote. Papadopoulos, on his own initiative, met and communicated repeatedly with individuals throughout 2016 to advance the campaign's relationship with Russia, including London-based professor Joseph Mifsud and Mifsud associates Olga Polonskaya and Ivan Timofeyev. Papadopoulos believed Mifsud, Polonskaya, and Timofeyev were connected to the Russian government and worked with them on ways for the campaign to engage with the Russian government. The committee found that the Trump campaign's rush to name and assemble a foreign policy team without thorough vetting resulted in their recruitment of inexperienced advisors over whom they exerted little control. Ultimately, the foreign policy team exposed the Trump campaign to significant counterintelligence vulnerabilities. Papadopoulos used multiple avenues to pursue a face-to-face meeting between Trump and President Putin. Papadopoulos believed that he was operating with the approval, or at least not the explicit disapproval, of senior campaign leadership, who he kept apprised of his efforts. Papadopoulos never successfully scheduled a meeting between Putin and Trump. Most campaign staff ignored Papadopoulos' engagements with foreign governments, although some encouraged his efforts. The committee did not find any evidence that the campaign ever asked Papadopoulos to cease these engagements. However, on several occasions, the campaign asked him to stop his interactions with the foreign press on its behalf, and in October 2016, several senior campaign staffers discussed ending Papadopoulos' role with the campaign, but never did so. Papadopoulos continued to work with the campaign through the presidential transition, during which time he assisted several foreign governments, though not Moscow, in establishing contact with campaign officials. Papadopoulos' contacts with Mifsud and Sergei Milyan, the president of the Russia-American Chamber of Commerce, RACC, RAC, are highly suspicious. Redacted. Milyan is a Belarusian-born American citizen and, as of 2018, was the president of the Russian-American Chamber of Commerce and a real estate broker in New York City. Furthermore, Milyan has had a working relationship with Trump since 2007. Redacted. Both Mifsud and Milyan exhibited behavior consistent with intelligence tradecraft, and both have significant ties to Russian government and business circles. Papadopoulos did not seem to consider himself a target for foreign intelligence services, despite being associated with the presidential campaign and his ongoing interactions with foreign government officials. Mifsud's use of Polonskaya as a proxy to further induce contact with Papadopoulos is consistent with intelligence tradecraft. Milyan's connections to the virtually non-existent RAC, combined with the odd nature of his request that Papadopoulos pursue a job with the Trump administration, are also consistent with intelligence tradecraft. The committee found Mifsud was aware of an aspect of Russia's active measures campaign in the 2016 election, and that Mifsud told Papadopoulos what he knew. The timing of Mifsud's visit to Moscow and his subsequent conversation with Papadopoulos are consistent with the timeline of the GRU's cyber penetration of the DNC and the DCCC, several weeks before any information about that activity was public. Furthermore, the information Mifsud conveyed to Papadopoulos was consistent with the GRU's information disclosure operations intended to damage the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. 2 paragraphs redacted. Papadopoulos held a purely advisory role on the campaign. He was never formal campaign staff, nor was he part of Trump's inner circle, and most campaign staff and other advisors he interacted with were dismissive of his efforts. Some senior members of the campaign viewed Papadopoulos as a liability, particularly in his interactions with foreign governments and press outlets. The committee notes that Papadopoulos engaged with more than just the Russian government. He also communicated with government officials from Egypt, Israel, Japan, and the United Kingdom. However, Papadopoulos' interactions to engage Russia occurred through non-government interlocutors. Papadopoulos never sought to conceal his efforts to make contact with Russian officials. On the contrary, he sought opportunities to demonstrate his networking to high-ranking campaign officials like Corey Lewandowski and Steve Bannon. Papadopoulos wanted to maintain his own identity as a conduit. He never put Mifsud or Timofeyev directly in contact with the campaign, or vice versa. Although the committee's insights are substantially limited by incomplete document production and witness testimony, the committee assesses that Papadopoulos was not a witting co-optee of the Russian intelligence services, but nonetheless presented as a prime intelligence target and potential vector for malign Russian influence. Limitations on the committee's investigation. The FBI first interviewed Papadopoulos on January 27, 2017, in connection with its counterintelligence investigation. On July 27, 2017, FBI agents arrested him for making false statements during this January 2017 interview. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to making these false statements on October 5, 2017. The FBI made some relevant records available to the committee, including notes from its interviews with Papadopoulos, as well as a detailed timeline of Papadopoulos' activities from March 2016 through August 2017. The committee tried several times to interview Papadopoulos. In discussing a potential appearance before the committee, Papadopoulos insisted certain topics be outside the scope of the interview, a condition which the committee rejected. Ultimately, the committee received two separate document productions from Papadopoulos. The first tranche of documents, produced on June 19, 2017, was incomplete. That production also appeared to be curated and annotated by Papadopoulos and painted a misleading representation of the facts related to his activities. Papadopoulos included with the documents a written statement that included numerous false or misleading statements similar to those he originally made to the FBI. The second tranche of documents, produced on June 6, 2019, was more comprehensive, but still omitted non-email communications, including text messages and social media messages, that the committee believes Papadopoulos may still possess. The committee also reviewed public transcripts of Papadopoulos' testimony to other congressional committees. The committee tried several times to contact and interview Mifsud, to no avail. These efforts included a letter sent to Mifsud on March 22, 2018, inviting him to appear for an interview with the committee. While the letter resulted in several exchanges with Mifsud's alleged legal counsel, those attempts ultimately ended in November 2018, when his attorneys claimed to have lost contact with their client. Joseph Mifsud and other central figures. Mifsud played a central role in Papadopoulos' attempts to engage the Russian government on behalf of the Trump campaign. The committee's awareness of Mifsud's activities is limited to document production and testimony from other witnesses, information from the executive branch, and open-source research, in the absence of Mifsud's documents and testimony. Paragraph redacted. Mifsud introduced Papadopoulos to Olga Polanskaya and Ivan Timofeyev. Polanskaya is a Russian citizen whom Mifsud used as a proxy for his activities. Polanskaya communicated with Papadopoulos up until and after the 2016 election. Papadopoulos also mistakenly thought Polanskaya was Putin's niece. Timofeyev is another member of the Valdai Discussion Club with whom Papadopoulos communicated through at least July 2016. Papadopoulos engaged both Polanskaya and Timofeyev, along with Mifsud, as part of his outreach to Russia. Paragraph redacted. According to FBI records and documents produced to the committee, Papadopoulos and Polanskaya remained in contact through the election. On a single day in October 2016, Papadopoulos and Polanskaya exchanged nearly 70 messages. During this conversation, Polanskaya demonstrated an awareness of Papadopoulos' intent to run for public office. Simona Mangiante, an Italian attorney who worked for the European Parliament until 2016, first interacted with Papadopoulos in approximately September 2016, when he sent her a LinkedIn message, noting that he had previously worked for the organization that Mangiante had just joined, the London Centre of International Law Practice, LCILP. Mangiante and Papadopoulos initially communicated via Skype or WhatsApp until Papadopoulos met Mangiante in person at the airport in New York in the spring of 2017. Mangiante married Papadopoulos on March 2, 2018. Mangiante has an independent, separate connection to Mifsud. According to Mangiante, she was introduced to Mifsud at some point between 2009 and 2016 through Gianni Pittella, the former head of a political group within the European Union. Mangiante described Pittella as, quote, someone I'm very close to, close quote, and further stated that Pittella was, quote, someone who was very close to Mifsud, close quote. Mangiante characterized Mifsud as being affiliated with a number of universities in Europe, including the Link Campus University in Rome, Italy, the University of East Anglia, and the University of Stirling in the United Kingdom, as well as serving as the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy. During Mangiante's 3 months' employment at the LCILP, which ended in late October 2016, Mifsud also became a director at the LCILP. Papadopoulos engages with foreign governments, inflating campaign role. The committee used limited document production and interviews to evaluate interactions Papadopoulos had throughout 2016 with foreign officials, Mifsud, and members of the Trump campaign, and the corresponding counterintelligence threats those activities represented. Papadopoulos seeks a role on a campaign. Papadopoulos first reached out to the Trump campaign in the summer of 2015 and was referred to Michael Glasner, the national political director for the Trump campaign, by Corey Lewandowski, the Trump campaign manager at the time. Papadopoulos expressed that he was seeking, quote, an advisory role to Mr. Trump on matters of energy security and U.S. policy in the Eastern Mediterranean, close quote. In September 2015, Glasner told Papadopoulos that the Trump campaign was not hiring policy advisors. From late 2015 until February 2016, Papadopoulos held a paid position with the Ben Carson campaign. After leaving, Papadopoulos reached out to a contact at the LCILP to ask if LCILP was hiring, noting that he had finished his role with the Carson campaign. By early February 2016, he agreed to join LCILP and began working in London. Around the same time, Papadopoulos sent messages to Lewandowski and Glasner, again expressing interest in joining the Trump campaign. On March 2, 2016, Papadopoulos sent Glasner another email message reiterating his interest. The same day, a representative from the Trump campaign responded to Papadopoulos with the subject line, quote, follow-up from Michael Glasner, close quote, to confirm that Papadopoulos would like to be introduced to Sam Clovis, who was the national co-chair and chief policy advisor for the Trump campaign and was at that time charged with forming a foreign policy team for the Trump campaign. Papadopoulos said yes. Clovis told the committee that the goal for creation of the foreign policy team was to alleviate pressure the Trump campaign was receiving regarding the candidate's foreign policy and national security experience. In Clovis's words, quote, we were desperate to try to get the press off our backs. These were people who had approached the campaign at one time or another and had enough rank or enough street cred, or I should say, at least had credentials that looked like we could possibly put them together on this national advisory team. My job, to put that list together, put it together, get a press release that let Hope Hicks, put a press release out on it, those kinds of things. Essentially, that was it. Once we had done that, the press backed off, and I moved on to other things, and I never worried about cultivating that group ever again, close quote. Hicks also said that in March 2016, then-candidate Trump was, quote, repeatedly asked about who was advising him on foreign policy. So we were, as a campaign, feeling pressure to put something together, close quote. Clovis and Papadopoulos spoke on March 6, 2016, about Papadopoulos joining the foreign policy team, and they may have discussed Russia. According to an August 2017 interview with the FBI, quote, Papadopoulos recalled having a telephone interview with Sam Clovis, on or about March 6, 2016, during which the topic of Russia came up. Clovis noted the importance of Russia to the foreign policy team. Papadopoulos remembered telling Clovis he did not have any Russian contacts during that call. Close quote. This is in contrast to what Clovis stated in his interview with the committee, during which he stated, quote, "I think my advice to George Papadopoulos has always been no to Russia." Close quote. On March 6, 2016, Clovis wrote an email update to senior campaign members, including Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Corey Lewandowski, Michael Glassner, and Stephen Miller, explaining that he had, quote, "made contact with everyone in the matrix. I have already had lengthy discussions with Walid Faris and George Papadopoulos. Both are on board," close quote. According to a, quote, "policy team matrix," close quote, document attached to the email, Papadopoulos was to support foreign policy issues and was the sole individual assigned to support energy issues. Clovis sent another email entitled, quote, "National Security Advisory Committee," close quote, to Ivanka Trump, Kushner, and Glassner on March 16, 2016, quote, "As you asked for today, find attached the list of those from whom I have commitments to the team," close quote. Papadopoulos is listed in the attachment as, quote, "oil and energy consultant, Hudson Institute, expert on Mediterranean, Caspian, and Middle Eastern energy and Israel, degrees from University College London, DePaul University, and Université Catholique de Louvain," close quote. On March 21, 2016, Trump announced some of the foreign policy team during a meeting with the editorial board of The Washington Post. During this meeting, Trump characterized Papadopoulos as, quote, "an energy and oil consultant, excellent guy," close quote. Papadopoulos meets Joseph Mifsud and Olga Polanskaya. On March 14, 2016, around the same time that he joined the Trump campaign, Papadopoulos first met London-based professor Joseph Mifsud, also known as Joseph D. Gabriel, while traveling in Rome, Italy. According to statements to the FBI, Papadopoulos said that he had traveled to Rome from approximately March 12 to March 17, 2016, with several other members of the LCILP in order to meet with individuals at the Link Campus University. The LCILP had arranged the trip and invited Papadopoulos, who accepted because he, quote, "just wanted to go to Rome," close quote. An individual named Nagi Idris, another director at LCILP, facilitated the introduction between Papadopoulos and Mifsud while they were in Rome. Although Mifsud worked for the LCILP, Papadopoulos had not previously met him. Mifsud's interest in Papadopoulos appeared entirely reliant on Papadopoulos' association with the Trump campaign. According to the statement of offense for Papadopoulos' guilty plea, quote, "Initially, Mifsud seemed uninterested in defendant Papadopoulos. However, after defendant Papadopoulos informed Mifsud about his joining the Trump campaign, the professor appeared to take great interest in defendant Papadopoulos. Defendant Papadopoulos was interested in Mifsud because, among other reasons, Mifsud claimed to have substantial connections with Russian government officials, which defendant Papadopoulos thought could increase his importance as a policy advisor to the campaign," close quote. Papadopoulos similarly told the FBI, quote, "Papadopoulos' first impression was that Mifsud was arrogant. His negative attitude toward Papadopoulos continued until Mifsud found out Papadopoulos was part of the Trump campaign. Mifsud then began to turn on the charm with Papadopoulos and tried to impress him. Mifsud told Papadopoulos he was a former diplomat with access to European leaders. Mifsud offered to help introduce Papadopoulos to the right people through his contacts," close quote. FBI technical analysis of Papadopoulos' cell phone indicates that Mifsud sent Papadopoulos a text message on March 22, 2016, writing, quote, "My number, Joseph," close quote. Papadopoulos told the House Judiciary Committee that Mifsud subsequently sent him an email stating that, quote, "It's very important for us to meet in London. I have to introduce you to somebody very important," close quote. According to Papadopoulos' statement of offense, Mifsud introduced Polanskaya to Papadopoulos as a relative of Vladimir Putin and as someone who had connections to senior Russian government officials. Papadopoulos testified to the House of Representatives, quote, My understanding was I was talking to a very senior-level diplomat's family member from Russia, close quote. He also testified that Idris reiterated Mifsud's claim, stating, quote, "This is Putin's niece or the Russian president's niece," close quote. On March 24, 2016, Papadopoulos met with Mifsud and Olga Polinskaya, a Russian national, at the Holborn Hotel. Papadopoulos recalled that they discussed U.S.-Russia trade issues during the meeting and noted that Polinskaya was escorted by an unknown male who did not join them. Papadopoulos' wife, Mangiante, told the committee that Papadopoulos thought Polinskaya was President Putin's niece because of the way Mifsud introduced her to Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos later explained that Polinskaya, who could barely speak English during their in-person meeting, then began communicating with him via electronic means in more fluent English. Papadopoulos characterized a transition in their relationship, shifting from, quote, "seemingly obscure girl" to now the interlocutor with Mifsud to the Russian government for me, close quote. On the same day, March 24, 2016, almost certainly after his meeting with Mifsud and Polinskaya, Papadopoulos performed internet searches for the following terms: Russian president niece, Russian president niece Olga, Russian president brother and sister, Joseph Mifsud, next Vietnam prime minister, Russian ambassador UK, Putin's niece Olga, Medvedev's niece Olga Putin, Vladimir Putin's brother and sister, Olga Medvedev. This is the first example of a pattern the committee observed in Papadopoulos' behavior, where, after a meeting, he spent time conducting internet research on individuals he met, or, presumably, the topics discussed at the meeting. While several of Papadopoulos' searches are focused on finding additional information on Polinskaya, Papadopoulos later noted in documents produced to the committee that, quote, "a quick Google search will demonstrate that Putin has no siblings," close quote. On the same day, March 24, 2016, following his meeting with Mifsud and Polinskaya, Papadopoulos sent an email to members of the Trump foreign policy team with the subject, quote, "meeting with Russian leadership, including Putin," close quote, stating, quote, "I just finished a very productive lunch with a good friend of mine, Joseph Mifsud, the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, who introduced me to both Putin's niece and the Russian ambassador in London, who also acts as the deputy foreign minister. The topic of the lunch was to arrange a meeting between us and the Russian leadership to discuss U.S.-Russia ties under President Trump. They are keen to host us in a, quote, neutral, close quote, city, or directly in Moscow. They said the leadership, including Putin, is ready to meet with us and Mr. Trump should there be interest, waiting for everyone's thoughts on moving forward with this very important issue. Furthermore, Mifsud is good friends with the soon-to-be next Prime Minister of Vietnam. He asked for me to join him on a trip there to meet with the next leader. Perhaps this is of interest to the rest of the campaign team as well?" Close quote. Papadopoulos testified to the House Judiciary Committee that he lied to the Trump campaign about being introduced to the Russian ambassador in London, clarifying that he, quote, "never met the Russian ambassador, just to make that completely clear," close quote. Minutes after Papadopoulos' email to other campaign advisors and staff, Clovis replied to the entire group, stating, quote, "George, this is most informative. Let me work it through the campaign. No commitments until we see how this plays out. My thought is that we should not go forward with any meetings with the Russians until we have had occasion to sit with our NATO allies, especially France, Germany, and Great Britain. We need to reassure our allies that we are not going to advance anything with Russia until we have everyone on the same page. More thoughts later today. Great work. Sam." Close quote. FBI records indicate that on March 26, 2016, Papadopoulos performed internet searches for, quote, Andrei Klimov, close quote, and, quote, Ivan Timofeyev, close quote. This search occurred more than 3 weeks prior to Papadopoulos' April 18, 2016 introduction to Timofeyev through Mifsud, suggesting that Mifsud may have raped Klimov or Timofeyev or both during his engagement with Papadopoulos. Redacted paragraph. The foreign policy team meets. Clovis sent an email to the newly established Trump campaign's foreign policy advisory team on March 28, 2016, stating, quote, I just got off the phone with Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama. He passed along that a meeting is being scheduled for 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, the 31st, location to follow. Please let me know if you're going to be able to attend, close quote. Papadopoulos wrote back to the group 30 minutes later, quote, Sam, I will be there too, flying in on the 30th, close quote. Papadopoulos stated that at the March 31, 2016 national security meeting of then-candidate Trump's foreign policy advisors held at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., he proposed the idea of arranging a meeting between Putin and Trump. Papadopoulos recalled telling the group in attendance that, quote, Putin wants to meet, close quote, and that the response to his suggestion from Trump was something to the effect of, quote, I like the idea, close quote, who subsequently asked Sessions for his opinion of the proposal. Papadopoulos believed that Trump and Sessions were somewhere between tacitly supportive of his idea and very supportive of his idea, and he left the meeting with the impression that, quote, these guys wanted this, close quote. Papadopoulos also told the FBI that he did not recall anyone at the meeting objecting to the proposal, and that he rather felt he had received a, quote, thumbs up, close quote. A picture of the meeting published on Trump's Instagram account showed that Sessions and members of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team, including J.D. Gordon, Papadopoulos, and Joseph Schmitz, attended the meeting. Clovis told the committee that his first in-person encounter with Papadopoulos was at the March 31, 2016 meeting. Quote, that's where I really got the sense at that meeting that he was there for himself and not for the campaign, and I felt like it was a mistake that we had included him. I just thought he was very self-serving, very much on the make. I never trusted him after that. Everything he did on his own, and we always had to go back and correct him afterwards. It got to the point, really, it got bad quickly. So we essentially cut him loose quickly, in my view. I never trusted him with anything, close quote. Gordon told the committee that he did not recall Papadopoulos proposing any outreach to the Russian government or Russian individuals, but did confirm that Papadopoulos was fully on board with Trump's desire to have a better relationship with Russia. Papadopoulos referenced his proposal again with two of the other foreign policy advisors. On April 5, 2016, Faris sent an email message to Papadopoulos in which he wrote, quote, let's think about how to engage your Arab and Mideast contacts either in London or in D.C., close quote. Papadopoulos replied from Tel Aviv, Israel, quote, and of course the Russians, as I mentioned during our meeting, close quote. On April 10, 2016, Papadopoulos also sent an email message to Carter Page, another foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, in which he asked if Page was available for a phone call, quote, to discuss the outreach to Russia and the Caucasus, close quote, noting that they, quote, both have experience dealing in that part of the world, so also wanted to look at any synergies, close quote. Page responded with an attempt to schedule a Skype conversation. Papadopoulos recalled having a Skype call with Page, and in particular recalled Page telling him to, quote, stop showing off, close quote. Although Papadopoulos did not remember exactly why Page had told him that, he surmised that, quote, it was likely a result of Papadopoulos' effort to coordinate with the Russians in late March 2016, close quote. When Page testified to the committee, he recalled speaking with Papadopoulos, quote, once on the phone, close quote. Papadopoulos' contact with Polinskaya and Mifsud accelerates. As an apparent follow-up to the March meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos emailed Polinskaya on April 10, 2016, stating, quote, this is George Papadopoulos, Donald Trump's advisor. We met with Joseph in London. The reason for my message is because he sent an email that you tried contacting me. I never received your SMS. I was in Israel for business, and now I am back in London. Are you still in London? If you are, it would be a pleasure to meet again. If not, we should have a call and discuss some things, close quote. Polinskaya responded the next day, April 11, 2016, copying Mifsud on the email and stating, quote, I am now back in St. Petersburg. I thank you for our meeting. I would be very pleased to support your initiatives between our two countries, and of course, I would be very pleased to meet you again, close quote. Papadopoulos responded back to Polinskaya on the same day, April 11, 2016, stating, quote, "I think a good step would be for me to meet with the Russian ambassador in London sometime this month. I would like to discuss with him, or anyone else you recommend, about a potential foreign policy trip to Russia." Close quote. Papadopoulos included a link in the email to a Jerusalem Post opinion article that he characterized as, quote, "beneficial to send around," close quote. The opinion article summarized Papadopoulos' remarks at an April 2016 luncheon with research associates at an Israeli think tank, which included, quote, "Unlike President Barack Obama, who weakly attempted to reset relations with Russia and then spent the latter part of his tenure isolating and sanctioning Russia, Donald Trump would overtly seek serious engagement with Russia on a range of common concerns." Close quote. Quote, "Trump sees Russian President Vladimir Putin as a responsible actor and potential partner." Close quote. Quote, "The U.S. and Russia must work to counter Chinese expansionism in Asia and the Middle East. Therefore, a policy of isolating Russia is not sustainable." Close quote. In response to Papadopoulos' email, Mifsud wrote back to Papadopoulos on the same day, April 11, 2016, that, quote, "This has already been agreed. I'm flying to Moscow on the 18th for a Valdai meeting, plus other meetings at the Duma. We will talk tomorrow." Close quote. The committee does not know what, specifically, Mifsud meant by, quote, "This has already been agreed," close quote. Papadopoulos wrote back to Mifsud and Polinskaya 8 minutes later, quote, "Excellent. See you tomorrow," close quote. On April 12, 2016, Papadopoulos appears to have had breakfast with Mifsud based on his last April 11, 2016 email and information made available from the FBI's timeline. Papadopoulos' schedule had a calendar entry for April 12, 2016 at 9:30 a.m. for 1 hour for, quote, "Andaz Hotel Breakfast, Liverpool Street, 9:30, close quote. The same day at 9:44 a.m., Mifsud emailed Papadopoulos and Nawaf Obaid regarding, quote, "Libya Confidential," close quote. Papadopoulos also had another calendar entry for April 13, 2016, for 1 hour for, quote, "1 p.m. lunch at Four Seasons," close quote, with Nawaf Obaid. Polinskaya added to Mifsud's response the following day, April 12, 2016, that she, quote, "already alerted my personal links to our conversation and your request. The embassy in London is very much aware of this. As mentioned, we are all very excited by the possibility of a good relationship with Mr. Trump. The Russian Federation would love to welcome him once his candidature would be officially announced," close quote. The committee does not have any insight into Polinskaya's connection to the Russian embassy in London. Mifsud introduces Papadopoulos to Ivan Timofeyev. On April 18, 2016, the same day that Mifsud had told Papadopoulos he was flying to Moscow, Mifsud introduced Ivan Timofeyev, Director of Programs at the Russian International Affairs Council, RIAC, to Papadopoulos via email. Timofeyev has led the, quote, "Euro-Atlantic Security," close quote, program at the Valdai Discussion Club since 2015 and has served as a professor at the Academy for Military Science in Russia since 2013, according to open source information. In the initial introductory message, Mifsud wrote, quote, "Dear George, Ivan, as promised, I had a long conversation today in Moscow with my dear friend Ivan from RIAC about a possible meeting between the two of you. Ivan is ready to meet with you in London, or USA or Moscow, close paren. I am putting the two of you in touch to discuss when and where this potential meeting can actually take place. Best wishes for your endeavors. Kind regards, Joseph," close quote. According to the Valdai Discussion Club's website, Mifsud appeared as part of a panel discussion in Moscow in April 2016 alongside Stefan Rowe. Timofeyev moderated the discussion, which focused on the geopolitical and oil market implications after a recent gathering of oil-producing nations. Papadopoulos responded the same day, April 18, 2016, suggesting that he and Timofeyev meet in London later in the month. In a series of email messages, Timofeyev and Papadopoulos scheduled a Skype call for Friday, April 22, 2016. On April 21, 2016, Papadopoulos sent an email message to Mifsud with the subject, quote, "meeting tomorrow," close quote, in which he asked if the professor was, quote, "free to meet tomorrow for a follow-up," close quote. During an interview with the FBI, Papadopoulos recalled, quote, having a Skype call with Timofeyev on April 22, 2016, which he believed was the first of 2 Skype calls he had with Timofeyev in total. Papadopoulos could not remember any details about what was discussed during the call. However, he surmised the 2 likely discussed relations between Russia, Israel, Cyprus, and China. The 2 may also have discussed setting up a potential meeting between Timofeyev and Papadopoulos. However, Papadopoulos could not recall that with any certainty. Papadopoulos then reiterated he had been pushing hard for a meeting with the Russians after his initial conversation with Clovis on March 6, 2016. Following the Skype call, Timofeyev wrote, quote, "George, thank you for an extensive talk. I propose to meet in London or in Moscow. What do you think?" Close quote. Papadopoulos responded, quote, "Regarding a meeting, how about we set one up here in London with the ambassador as well to discuss a process moving forward? Can you come next week? It is my objective to set the groundwork for a potential trip and to understand the U.S.-Russia relationship before I submit to my team." Close quote. Timofeyev responded to Papadopoulos on April 24, 2016, stating, quote, "Next week is totally impossible, for I have to renew my visa. I shall also need to consult with Minister Ivanov." Close quote. The next day, April 25, 2016, Timofeyev wrote to Papadopoulos, quote, "Dear George, I have just talked to Igor Ivanov, the president of RIAC and former foreign minister of Russia. His advice is to start preparation of the Moscow visit via the Russian embassy in Washington, for the issue is of political kind. Would you be available for a quick talk today? Keep in touch, Ivan." Close quote. According to FBI records, Papadopoulos searched LinkedIn for, quote, "Alisher Usmanov," close quote, on April 24, 2016. The committee has no indication as to why Papadopoulos would conduct this search, but based on Papadopoulos' previous behavior, it would be logical to assume that Timofeyev may have raised Usmanov in conversation. According to Forbes, Usmanov is a Russian business magnate who is estimated to have a net worth of $12.6 billion in March 2020. 2 paragraphs redacted. Between April 25, 2016 and April 27, 2016, Papadopoulos and Timofeyev exchanged emails to coordinate another Skype call to discuss Timofeyev's email from April 25, 2016, regarding Igor Ivanov's advice to plan the Moscow visit via the Russian embassy in Washington. The email exchange concluded with a message from Papadopoulos noting, quote, "I have a couple of minutes to talk now before Mr. Trump's speech. I am on Skype," close quote. Papadopoulos recalled speaking with Timofeyev via Skype on April 27, 2016. Papadopoulos characterized the interaction as, quote, "strange," close quote, as he remembered Timofeyev being overly formal during the call. Papadopoulos also described hearing static noises on the call, which Papadopoulos thought suggested that someone was recording the call. Other relevant Papadopoulos meetings in April. On April 19, 2016, Papadopoulos met an individual named Oleg Lebedev. In an email sent the same day, Papadopoulos wrote, quote, "Was very nice meeting you tonight. I am sending you my recent piece and LinkedIn profile. See you tomorrow," close quote. In response, Lebedev wrote back to Papadopoulos, quote, "Great meeting you, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Let's make Byzantium great again. Good to connect on LinkedIn. Could not find you on Facebook," close quote. According to FBI interviews, Papadopoulos met Lebedev at the Byzantium Cafe in London through Lebedev's wife, Maria Alexopoulou. Papadopoulos recalled that Lebedev was a big Trump supporter in Russia and had told Papadopoulos that Russia is a friend of Trump. Lebedev claimed to have contacts in the Russian government. Papadopoulos thought Lebedev was in the oil business in Moscow, but had a house in London with his wife. Papadopoulos meets with Mifsud in London, discusses, quote, "dirt," close quote, on Clinton. Papadopoulos met with Mifsud on the morning of April 26, 2016, at the Andaz Hotel in London for breakfast. During the breakfast, Mifsud, who had just returned from a trip to Moscow where he had met with high-level Russian government officials, stated that the Russians had dirt, in the form of emails, on Hillary Clinton. Papadopoulos described Mifsud as, quote, giddy, like he had something he wanted to get off his chest, close quote, prior to his conveying the information about the Clinton emails. When asked by the FBI to explain what Mifsud told him about the Russians having dirt on Clinton, Papadopoulos told the FBI the following, quote, Mifsud had just returned from a trip to Moscow, where he met with the Duma, Russian parliament, attended a forum, and had meetings related to academics. When referring to the dirt, Mifsud told Papadopoulos, quote, they have her emails, close quote, and specifically mentioned they had, quote, thousands, close quote, of them. Papadopoulos could not recall if Mifsud mentioned the names of the individuals he met with in Russia. When asked what Papadopoulos thought when he heard the information from Mifsud, Papadopoulos recalled it being, quote, a strange thing to hear, close quote. Papadopoulos inquired of Mifsud how he could know such information, to which Mifsud stated, quote, they told me, close quote. When Papadopoulos referred to Mifsud's statement of, quote, they told me, close quote, Papadopoulos extended both of his hands and pointed at himself with both index fingers, close quote. Following the breakfast meeting around noon on April 26, 2016, Mifsud emailed Papadopoulos an article titled, quote, U.S.-Russian Relations, The Middle Cannot Hold, close quote. The article, published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies on April 14, 2016, criticized President Obama's approach to geopolitical relations between the United States and Russia following the invasion of Crimea, noting the Obama administration's approach was the, quote, middle way, close quote. In response to Mifsud's email, approximately 4 hours later, Papadopoulos replied, quote, thank you for this, Joseph. Very informative, close quote. Following paragraph redacted. Papadopoulos meets Australian diplomats. On April 19, 2016, Christian Cantor, a political counselor at the Embassy of Israel to the United Kingdom in London, introduced Papadopoulos to Erica Thompson, a political counselor at the Australian High Commission in London. The introduction occurred via email in which Cantor stated, quote, George is a current Trump advisor. I'm sure you'll find very interesting things to talk about, close quote. Papadopoulos testified to the House Judiciary Committee that he had been introduced to Cantor via one of his friends who was an economic counselor at the Embassy of Israel to the United States, and that he understood Thompson to be Cantor's girlfriend. On April 20, 2016, Thompson replied to Cantor's email, suggesting that she and Papadopoulos meet following President Obama's visit to the United Kingdom. Papadopoulos replied to Thompson the next day, suggesting that the two meet on Tuesday, April 26, 2016. The committee assesses that Papadopoulos and Thompson met on April 26, 2016, as previously coordinated, sometime following Papadopoulos' breakfast engagement with Mifsud. On May 9, 2016, Thompson wrote Papadopoulos, thanking him for, quote, meeting on Friday, close quote, and checking to see if Papadopoulos would be, quote, still up for a meeting with her boss, Alexander Downer, close quote. She suggested grabbing, quote, a drink with him tomorrow, maybe around 6, close quote. Thompson proposed the Kensington Wine Rooms, located in the Kensington Borough in London, for the engagement as her boss, Sir Alexander Downer, Australia's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, lived nearby. Papadopoulos agreed. Documents publicly released by the Government of Australia show a calendar appointment on Downer's calendar for May 10th titled, quote, 6 p.m., meeting with George Papadopoulos, advisor Donald J. Trump for president, close quote, which included a link to Papadopoulos' LinkedIn profile, as well as a heavily redacted diplomatic cable prepared by Downer on May 11, 2016, to Canberra titled, quote, UK, U.S. Donald Trump, Views from Trump's Advisor, close quote. Although the email between Thompson and Papadopoulos indicates they met on Friday, May 6, 2016, the committee does not have any indications as to where they met or what was discussed. Just after midnight on the morning of May 10, 2016, Papadopoulos searched for the following terms on the Internet: Australian High Com, London, current Australian government, Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, Conservative, Kensington Wine Rooms, Erica Thompson, and Erica Thompson, Australia. Papadopoulos also visited the LinkedIn site for an individual named Erica Thompson. In the late afternoon on May 10, 2016, and prior to the meeting with Downer, Papadopoulos again searched the Internet for Kensington Wine Rooms, Australian High Com, London, and Alexander Downer. Later that evening, at approximately 11 o'clock, Papadopoulos performed an Internet search for The Waterway. On May 10, 2016, Thompson and Downer met with Papadopoulos. After the engagement, Papadopoulos sent Thompson an email stating, quote, "Great time tonight. Thanks for the introduction. See you soon," close quote. There are some inconsistencies in the stories surrounding the evening of May 10, 2016. Papadopoulos told the FBI that he recalled the encounter occurring at the Waterway pub rather than the Kensington Wine Rooms. One possibility is that the FBI and Papadopoulos may have conflated the reference to the May 10, 2016 meeting at the Kensington Wine Rooms with the April 26th or May 6th meetings the committee surmises occurred between Papadopoulos and Thompson. An alternative hypothesis is that Papadopoulos and Thompson departed the Kensington Wine Rooms on May 10, 2016, and met up later at the Waterway pub, which would be consistent with Papadopoulos' Internet search for the Waterway at 10:07 p.m. Papadopoulos told the FBI that he recalled having several drinks with the Australians, specifically, quote, 3 drinks made with gin, close quote. Papadopoulos also recalled being intoxicated after those 3 drinks. When specifically asked, Papadopoulos stated he did not recall telling the Australians about the Clinton-related emails. The Kensington Wine Rooms describes itself as having, quote, a reputation as one of London's best wine bars, close quote, and offers numerous wine tastings, either through self-serve dispensers or by the glass. The drinks menu for the Waterway notably includes a section labeled, quote, gin and things, close quote. Papadopoulos testified to Congress that he and Downer, quote, had 1 drink, close quote, and was, quote, certainly not drunk, close quote, during the May 10, 2016 meeting, which seems to contradict the 3 gin drinks described above. Downer stated during a televised interview that he, along with another individual, met Papadopoulos at the, quote, Kensington Wine Bar, close quote, at 6 p.m. for about an hour. 3 paragraphs redacted. Papadopoulos edits Trump's Mayflower speech. While Papadopoulos was engaged with Timofeyev and Mifsud in London, he also consulted on preparations for an upcoming Trump foreign policy speech. On April 23, 2016, Stephen Miller, senior policy advisor for the Trump campaign, sent an email only to Papadopoulos with the subject, quote, confidential, close hold, close quote, which attached the, quote, outline of remarks for WED, close quote. 6 minutes later, Papadopoulos wrote back to Miller, quote, looks solid. If needed, I have some input bullet points I can add this weekend, close quote. Miller replied 1 minute later stating, quote, thanks, whatever works for you, close quote. After a series of back and forths, Papadopoulos sent Miller his edited version of the outline on April 25, 2016, stating, quote, please find my edits attached. Look forward to your thoughts. I'll stay up. Should I send to anyone else on the team, i.e. Sam or Paul, close quote. Miller and Papadopoulos then exchanged a series of emails in short succession regarding Papadopoulos' availability for surrogacy opportunities, during which Papadopoulos stated, quote, I was recently hosted by the Israeli government after I delivered a talk at an energy and security conference there. They are ready to host Mr. Trump when the time is right for him, and have also invited him to a big conference the largest newspaper there is hosting in July that Netanyahu will also be speaking at, close paren. The Russian government has an open invitation by Mr. Putin for Mr. Trump to meet him when he is ready as well. The advantage of being London is that these governments tend to speak a bit more openly in, quote, neutral, close quote, cities, close quote. Miller told the committee that he did not recall this email exchange until the SCO showed it to him. He further stated that, quote, "It's possible that I didn't even reply to it, or that I gave sort of a flip reply, but I certainly didn't engage on it substantively," close quote. On the same day, April 25, 2016, Papadopoulos also sent Clovis his edits for the foreign policy speech. Clovis testified to the committee that he, Clovis, did not have any role with the foreign policy speech delivered at the Mayflower Hotel, nor did he have any role in consolidating or relaying comments received on the speech. A comparison of Papadopoulos' edits to the outline that Miller sent to Lewandowski on April 25, 2016, shows that Papadopoulos' suggested edits to the speech outline were largely rejected. On April 27, 2016, after Trump delivered the foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel, Papadopoulos sent the following message via email to Miller, quote, "Great speech today from Mr. Trump. If you have a chance for a Skype session tomorrow or Friday, let me know. Have some interesting messages coming in from Moscow about a trip when the time is right," close quote. Papadopoulos told the FBI that the, quote, "interesting messages," close quote, did not pertain to what Mifsud had told him one day prior. The subsequent 7 messages exchanged relating to this email conversation were redacted by Papadopoulos when produced to the committee. Also, on April 27, 2016, Papadopoulos wrote Lewandowski an email message with the subject, quote, "Messages from Russia," close quote, in which he wrote, quote, "Great speech today by Mr. Trump. Glad I could assist. The reason for my message is because I wanted to ask if you are free for a call tomorrow or Friday to discuss Russia's interest in hosting Mr. Trump. Have been receiving a lot of calls over the last month about Putin wanting to host him and the team when the time is right," close quote. Lewandowski and Papadopoulos exchanged 3 messages in an attempt to schedule a call, though the committee does not believe the two discussed the matter at that time. Papadopoulos resurrected this particular email thread again on June 1, 2016, which is described below. Papadopoulos uses the speech to encourage a meeting with Russian leaders. Following the April 27, 2016 foreign policy speech, Papadopoulos reinitiated contact with Mifsud and Polanskaya in an apparent effort to coordinate a meeting between the Trump campaign and officials with the Russian Federation. The day after the speech, Papadopoulos asked them separately if they had heard Trump's Mayflower speech. Polanskaya replied on April 29, 2016, that she had seen Trump's speech and told Papadopoulos, quote, "I agree with many things, and I like the fact that your position towards Russia is much softer than many of the Republicans and Democrats," close quote. Papadopoulos responded later on April 29, quote, "I am now in the process of seeing if we will come to Russia. Do you recommend I get in touch with a minister or embassy person in Washington or London to begin organizing the trip?" close quote. Polanskaya replied later that day stating, quote, "I think it would be better to discuss this question with Joseph Mifsud," close quote. Possibly in response to Polanskaya's suggestion, Papadopoulos wrote to Mifsud on April 29, 2016, quote, "I haven't heard from the Russian embassy or anyone about sending an invitation. I need an answer by next week for my campaign," close quote. Mifsud replied 2 minutes later, asking if he should call Papadopoulos. The committee cannot confirm whether Papadopoulos and Mifsud spoke, and if they did, exactly what was discussed. However, on April 29, 2016, 3 hours after Polanskaya suggested that Papadopoulos speak with Mifsud, Papadopoulos wrote to her indicating that he had called Mifsud. Papadopoulos also got back in touch with Timofeyev. Between April 27, 2016 and April 30, 2016, Papadopoulos and Timofeyev exchanged 5 email messages to, quote, "follow up," close quote, and discuss specifics. Timofeyev, minutes after Papadopoulos' likely call with Mifsud, wrote to Papadopoulos, quote, "Please do send me a draft letter to the ambassador. I will look through it and propose my follow-up," close quote. Papadopoulos replied 6 minutes later, stating, quote, "The draft letter I send cannot be better than Mr. Trump's precise speech on his intention to repair U.S.-Russia ties. I assume the speech was widely covered. We have already been invited by 4 countries to visit in the summer, and our schedule is moving at a very fast pace. For this reason, I have until Wednesday to give my team an update on the potential trip to meet Mr. Putin. I am supposed to be in Greece on Monday to meet with officials there, but can come back to London next week to arrange a meeting with people here in a, quote, neutral, close quote, city. The message should be, we are keen to meet and discuss U.S.-Russia ties and where they can be improved, close quote. Possibly as a follow-up to their conversation on April 29th, Mifsud wrote Papadopoulos an email on April 30th, 2016, with the subject line, Russian reply, all in caps, in which he stated, quote, I have discussed this opportunity with Minister Ivanov. He proposed to start with the Russian ambassador in Moscow. George, you will need to draft a letter. Ivan is ready to help you. Please contact him urgently, and he will provide his follow-up to you. As for the contacts, Ivan and others through Olga will make an inquiry in Moscow how to proceed, close quote. The Russian reply email from Mifsud started a discussion as to whether the Trump campaign needed to ask for an invitation to Moscow. Papadopoulos noted for Mifsud that, quote, Mr. Trump's speech should have been the signal to meet, close quote, and that, quote, my campaign won't be interested in asking to visit Moscow. Guests are either invited or they are not, close quote. Mifsud agreed and told Papadopoulos that he had, quote, just spoken to them, close quote, and that, quote, they will let you know who to meet to organize it with an invite, close quote. Papadopoulos responded, quote, excellent, thank you for your critical help on this, Joseph. It's history-making if it happens, close quote. Timofeyev wrote to Papadopoulos and Mifsud 4 days later on May 4, 2016, stating he had spoken with his colleagues at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MFA, and that they are, quote, open for cooperation, close quote. Papadopoulos forwarded Timofeyev's May 4, 2016 email to Lewandowski on the same day with the subject, quote, forward Russian outreach, close quote, and asked, quote, what do you think? Is this something we want to move forward with, close quote. Lewandowski forwarded the message from Papadopoulos to Clovis 5 minutes later. Clovis responded back to Lewandowski less than 1 hour later, quote, I think there are some legal issues we will have to mitigate, meeting with foreign officials as a private citizen. Let me check and I will get back to you today, close quote. Papadopoulos forwarded the same May 4, 2016 email from Timofeyev to Clovis on May 5, 2016 with the text, quote, Russia updates, close quote. The committee did not obtain any communications in which Clovis or other campaign leadership telling Papadopoulos to cease his interactions with Timofeyev or Mifsud regarding Russia. On May 7, 2016, Papadopoulos replied to Timofeyev's May 4 email, stating that the delay in responding was due to, quote, shuffling that has occurred since Mr. Trump clinched the nomination. I will get back to you and Joseph soon on this. Glad the MFA is interested, close quote. In response to Papadopoulos' May 7, 2016 email, Mifsud replied 5 minutes later, asking Papadopoulos to call him. Papadopoulos and Mifsud exchanged several emails to coordinate a phone call via Skype. Although the committee cannot confirm whether Papadopoulos and Mifsud spoke, the committee believes they did based on the emails exchanged. On May 13, 2016, Mifsud wrote a long proposal to Papadopoulos for the way ahead, including his first offer of serving as a surrogate for the campaign and a liaison of sorts to Europe. Quote, further to our recent conversations, I am pleased to give you an update of what we discussed. 1. We will continue to liaise through you with the Russian counterparts in terms of what is needed for a high-level meeting of Mr. Trump with the Russian Federation. 2. I will set up interviews for you with Il Giornale and Corriere della Sera in Italy, focusing on Mr. Trump's foreign policy perspectives. 3. If provided with key speaking highlighted points, I will use them in the next European Council on Foreign Relations meeting to be held in June in The Hague. 4. I will liaise with the European Parliament about the possibility of an invitation to Brussels for Mr. Trump. 5. Once updated, I can use specific points during the campaign to be turned into articles in the European media. I can also be a central point if you wish to sustain key agreed foreign policy and diplomatic points for the campaign in Europe and the Middle East. Paren, I am often asked to chair important debates, e.g., the Doha Forum and other fora in Morocco, Bahrain, etc. Close paren. 6. I am extremely keen to support Mr. Trump's campaign in foreign policy issues with Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, and wish to do so from Europe and also with my links inside the USA, paren, e.g., the Washington diplomatic community and publications, close paren. 7. If needed, I can also prepare and sign op-eds sustaining Mr. Trump's campaign. 8. Once the campaign gets started, I would be keen to be on any shows as a, quote, neutral, close quote, opinion maker and expert in support of Mr. Trump vis-a-vis global issues. 9. I am also extremely interested in following Mr. Trump throughout some of his campaign trail and reporting back to European media as an, quote, independent, close quote, opinion maker. 10. I am open to any suggested action plans which the team might wish to make now and the future, and to contribute with my knowledge to the campaign, from inside or the outside. I will be getting back to you by telephone or for a meeting next week when I am in London. Close quote. The committee has no indication that Papadopoulos pursued Mifsud's proposal to act as the campaign's surrogate or liaison. Separately, Papadopoulos wrote an email message to Lewandowski on May 14, 2016, providing updates on European security and energy topics. In his email, Papadopoulos also stated that, quote, the Greek and Cypriot governments, the EU Parliament, and Russian governments have also relayed to me that they are interested in hosting Mr. Trump, close quote. The next day, on May 15, 2016, Lewandowski forwarded the message to Clovis. Later that day, Clovis wrote an email message with the subject, quote, update part 2, close quote, to Lewandowski, copying Glassner and Hicks, in which he included as the third bullet of the message, quote, still working on the ins and outs of going to Russia as a candidate, close quote. When asked whether the bullet point within Clovis's update related to Papadopoulos' effort, Clovis stated, quote, no. It was a discussion that we had had in the campaign about a foreign trip. The trip, Russia, was going to be an add-on because we were going to go to the UK, Germany. We'd have done a European swing and maybe an Israel swing as a foreign trip, and Russia would have been only after we had considered whether it was legal and all the other aspects of it, close quote. When Lewandowski was asked about the same point, he told the committee, quote, to the best of my recollection, we knew from day one we weren't doing any overseas travel. There was never a discussion that I'm aware of, that I was privy to, inside the campaign of ever going to Russia in any way, shape, or form, close quote. The committee notes the discrepancy between the contemporaneous email communication written by Clovis and the later testimony of Clovis and Lewandowski. The committee gives greatest credibility to the written records, which suggest that the campaign was at least open to the idea of a foreign trip.